So I'm here with Mark Baker, who is the Managing Director of Origin Live. And Mark, I just want to say thank you very much for hosting me, allowing me to come and see you and make this video.
Pleasure, Terry.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. And I'm here to learn about tonearms and turntables and other bits and pieces. But I felt it was important to ask you about Origin Live because, if I'm right, you set up the business back in the 1980s. So you've been making tonearms, turntables and everything related to vinyl playback for a very long time. But for the viewers who might not be familiar with Origin Live, who are you guys as a hi-fi manufacturer and what makes you unique in 2023?
Origin Live is a small manufacturing company, as you've said, with 12 people. We manufacture everything in-house and we specialize in tonearms and turntables. So we make all our own component parts. Started off in a garage, making back in 1986, which is 37 years ago, making cables. And that was because I had a cable idea, which was to combine a thick wire and a thin wire together. We were the first people to do that, to my knowledge, and after that, so many people have copied that idea. But back in the day, it was quite new. So that was our first product. And then we went into isolation platforms, and we won an award for our isolating platforms. For a while, we were the go-to platform for Lin LP12s and most high-end decks, because it made a difference to the way that the record players sounded. While we were doing this, I was starting to play around with making turntables because a friend of mine, Les Westenholm of Avondale Audio, had been giving us work to modify his tonearms. He'd come up with a brilliant design on how to make a Riga tonearm sound better than an SME5 and an ECOS. It was a giant-killing design. And I learned so much from Les, and he really got me started in many of the concepts that I use today. We broke into the market really just as CDs were obliterating manufacturers. Absolutely. I mean, the number of turntables manufacturers who went under was insane. But we kept going, and I kept going really because I believed that LP was a better sound than CD. But in the face of the market at that time, I probably had psychiatric problems to continue in that sort of vein. But thankfully, it's paid off, and the market for vinyl now is very strong. In terms of what makes us unique, I could point to various features on our products, like the fact that on our sub-chassis we use a single point suspension, which is a cantilever suspension. We're the only people who do that. But I think really I would say that what makes us unique is that many of our products in reviews are called giant killers because they outperform the competition at a lot lower price. So the performance per pound you spend with us is the highest you'll probably find anywhere in the world.
And there was a few little clips of information there that I think really leads us nicely onto my next question, which is to look at the greater context of tonearms, because as a beginner to vinyl, it can be quite a confusing situation looking at what's important. So when you look at a tonearm, I think it's obvious what it does, but not necessarily obvious what the implications of it might be to sound quality. So why are different tonearms, why is tonearm design important, and how does it influence sound quality?
Great, that's such a good question, Terry. And it's one that when I first got into hi-fi, I really puzzled over, because I'd read the magazines and they were always saying how you must invest about 75% of your budget in a good turntable. And I couldn't figure out why, because I mean, it's just a disc that rotates and a cartridge on the end of it. And I'd thought, well, the cartridge is doing all the work. So it really mystified me for quite a while, this problem. But on thinking about it over the years, I soon developed an idea about why it makes such a difference. It's important to kind of understand what a cartridge is doing when it's going through your record groove. And I think the best analogy is to compare the stylus with a skier going down a mogul field. And just for those who don't know what moguls are, they're heaps of snow. They can stand up to about this high. And skiers, when they go down a slope, it can be full of these moguls. If you ever watch the Olympic freestyle skiers going down a mogul field, they'll be going like this. They turn about once a second. It's so quick what they have to do to negotiate all these bumps. And the motion that they're going through is exactly like a stylus. A stylus doesn't go up and down. That measures one part of the musical signal, and they're going from side to side. So the motion is kind of like this. It's just like a downhill skier going down. And that motion is so quick. You can imagine a downhill skier. He's doing 1 turn per second. A stylus has to manage up to 30,000 turns per second. So, I can probably get up to about 5 turns a second. The accelerations are phenomenal and unimaginably high. I mean, that's why when you say that the people who design cartridges say that they exert a force of 8 tons per square inch on the vinyl wall. And as they go past, the friction and pressure is so high that they actually momentarily melt the vinyl at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, don't get the idea it's destroying all your vinyl, because it's like, ice skaters when they go around a ring. They don't destroy the ice ring. It instantly freezes over, and that's the same with vinyl. But I think that if it wasn't going on a liquid surface of vinyl, you'd have a lot more surface noise from your record. But it is a very smooth movement. We use something called a clock gauge to measure very small differences in dimensions. Okay, so a clock gauge will measure down to a micron generally. Some go smaller than that. But a micron is 1,000th of a millimeter. And to give that context, a human hair is 70 microns thick. A record groove is 40 microns thick. So it's so tiny. And the movements are, very tiny. Now, if you imagine the stylus, it's measuring, if we just consider the vertical movement for the moment, if you think of this as the stylus, it's constantly moving up and down in the groove. Ideally, your groove is absolutely rock solid on a plane, say here. So the stylus is moving in and out of that groove, up and down, and side to side. But if you think that the surface of the record is not actually rock solid at all, it's vibrating. Very, very small vibrations, remember. But in the scale of things, they're huge. So the record surface is doing that. Now, that is obviously going to affect the measurement of the stylus in the groove. On top of that, you also have the tone arm. And the tone arm is supposedly rock solid, because the idea of a cartridge is that the stylus moves up and down, and it's attached to a cantilever, which is attached to a motor mechanism which generates your electrical signal. The stylus, the cartridge body, should remain stationary, but if it's held in a tone arm, which is moving, it's not held stationary. So you've got the additional movement here. So you've got all these movements. So to be able to eliminate vibration is absolutely critical to getting a better sound. To give an idea of the scale of the problem, and I think that this is a really important context, is I like to think that you have to amplify a mechanical signal 8,000 times by the time it gets to the speaker, because your mechanical movements are translated into electrical signal, and those electrical signals are amplified 8,000 times, about 1,000 times in the phono stage and about 8 times in your amplifier. But to give an idea of the scale of that, I like to give the illustration of a Sainsbury's shopping bag, which is bright orange, by the way. So that's why I say Sainsbury's, plus the fact I shop there. But if you imagine a Sainsbury's shopping bag on the very pinnacle of Mount Everest, and say you're on a mountain, say 5 miles away, with a very high power zoom lens, and you're just focused on this shopping bag, the scale of the signal is the equivalent of zooming out from that shopping bag to base camp on Everest and seeing the whole mountain. You would lose sight visually of the shopping bag. It's tiny in comparison, but it's an 8,000th of the size of Mount Everest in terms of the height of the shopping bag. The human brain can't get around that, but that's the sort of scale of magnification. And what could possibly go wrong in that? It's like having a little model of Mount Everest the size of a shopping bag and trying to amplify it 8,000 times to get the real Everest. What could possibly distort and go wrong? Well, an awful lot of things.
That analogy I found fascinating when we spoke about that before, because it just shows what we're dealing with here and what we're trying to overcome, or what you guys really, I suppose, trying to overcome with designs of turntables and designs of tone arms. And what I've just taken from that little bit of conversation is the importance of the tone arm essentially trying to be exactly the same as the platter in terms of a very stable platform, but yet it's moving around all the time. It's because it has to move, isn't it? So the design of that must be really difficult actually to try and make that work perfectly, which I think leads me lovely onto my next question, because it was actually one of my viewers that recommended one of your tone arms to me as a potential upgrade for my first turntable.
Do thank him for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the silver that he recommended, and of course that made me look on your website, and you've got a big range of tone arms on there. I think ranging from very reasonably priced, actually, when I looked at the designs and how nice they looked, up to very esoterically priced as well. So as a beginner, you look at that and think, wow, I can't really easily discern differences between these. Sometimes tone arm differences look very visual when they're obvious, like big ones and small ones, or the ones that track, linear tracking designs. But beyond that, as a beginner, it's very difficult to work out what is what. So looking at your two most affordable tone arms, the onyx and the silver, can you tell us maybe what the differences might be between those two, and what would be the sonic differences or the potential performance increase from the silver maybe over the onyx?
I think before we talk about the difference between products, Terry, it's important to understand what makes one tone arm better than another. And I think that when you read reviews or manufacturers' brochures, they always talk about stiffness and damping. There is much more to the story than that, by the way, and it exasperates me that it's always simplified like that. But if I can give an analogy of why that's important, this is if this represents a tone arm, and you've got a cartridge on the end here. Imagine my hand as the cartridge. When the cartridge is being forced through the grooves, it's obviously moving the end of. It wants to move the end of the tone arm like this, and the tone arm must resist that because it's supposed to hold the cartridge rock solid stationary, but it doesn't. When you think about vibration, there's four things that can happen. The ideal thing is that the energy is transmitted out of the cartridge as fast as possible along the tone arm and down to earth. That's the ideal scenario.
So that would go along because obviously the camera couldn't see that. Sorry, Mark.
Right.
So that would travel along the tone arm, away from the cartridge, and out into the turntable. That would be ideal.
That's right, yeah. Okay. And then down to the earth.
Okay.
The next thing that can happen to vibration is that it's absorbed as it goes down the tube. And that can happen by compression and contraction, constant compression and contraction. There's an absorption that's going on. The third thing that can happen is that it sends the arm into resonance, which is this. And that loses vibration. That loses energy too, because when you bend things, it loses energy. But it also creates movement for the cartridge, which is a bit of a disaster. And the fourth thing that can happen, which is the hardest to control, is that energy will travel down the arm and hit the counterweight or the yoke and be reflected straight back into the cartridge. And so what we try and do is create what you call a mechanical diode. And for those who don't know what a diode is, if you think of electricity, a diode will only allow current to go in one direction. So a mechanical diode only allows vibration to go in one direction. And so what you want to do is to create something so that the energy will go in this direction, be earth, but it cannot return. And that is really hard to do. Most people don't even think that mechanical diodes can exist. And they're very, very difficult to design. And it's taken me years to kind of understand how to do it.
What about then looking at, back to the products, looking at maybe the onyx and the silver? Can we maybe look at, I suppose, what the silver then offers to solve those problems, maybe more than the onyx? That might be a nice way to look at that.
This is the onyx, which is our entry-level tone arm. The thing about the onyx is the tube is a single tube that goes all the way through to the end of the counterweight. And some people think that single-piece arm tubes are the way to go. We don't. We think that you should have joins in the tube, and that's for the diodes reasons that I've explained before. One thing you picked up on, Terry, was that we use a falling weight for side bias. And we use that because it's the most effective way of controlling the side bias. It's very linear, and it's also extremely free from vibration.
Can I just ask you about side bias? Explain to me what that is and what the problem is, I suppose, that you're trying to overcome with the falling weight, please.
That is quite a long one, actually, because most people think that the force on the tone arm is to push the record out. Sorry, it's push the stylus out because of centrifugal force. It's not. Because of offsets, it actually wants to drag inwards. So you have to to keep the forces equal in the groove, you have to put a counter force on that, which is called side bias. And that keeps the record wear down because basically you're not forcing it onto the inner side of the groove.
So it keeps the stylus in the middle of the groove,
yes,
essentially. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know that you can look at any specifications and know what something's going to sound like, because most of what goes on is completely hidden from view. For instance, the type of materials that we're using in the arm tube makes a huge difference. Some people are using wooden arm tubes, some people are using carbon fiber, various alloys, some people are using composites, mixtures of the two. Our top arms use 6 layers in their arm tube. The coating on the arm tube is critical. On and on it goes. So what you think is a simple thing is actually quite complex, and there's numerous other variations, like the profile of the arm tube itself. You've got tapered tubes, you've got stepped tubes, so you've got very large diameter tubes because they're super rigid in low frequency vibration. You've got very thin tubes, you've got long tubes, you've got short tubes. So there's a lot of variation that goes on.
So what I've taken from just that little bit of explanation, Mark, is that it's quite a pun to say it, but it's quite a balancing act by the sounds of things in terms of, a pun because of the design. It's a balancing act of getting a tone arm to work how you think it should. And you have to make specific decisions or decisions based on what you think is the best approach to achieve overcoming the problems. Yeah. So when we look at the Onyx for £480, then we look at the silver, which I think is £790. What are the differences, and what would an audiophile expect to get as a sound quality improvement?
Now, most people think that the big differences in the tone arm are bound up in the bearings. It's not. It's bound up in the tube. The bearings are important, very, very important part of the design, but the tube is the most important for most of the reasons I've explained previously. So the silver uses a higher specification material in the tone arm tube itself, much more expensive. And then we decouple the counterweight by using rear stub. So it's a 2-part tube, but this also acts partly as our mechanical diode. So it reduces the reflection of vibration back up the tube. When you're going up through arms, it's a bit like going up through the range of cartridges, except I would say the difference per pound is probably about double that you get by investing in a more expensive cartridge. But every aspect of the performance will improve. It's not like with a speaker you might gain more in, say, the bass and other things aren't as good. I mean, I've had people say that they've preferred the model below in the speaker range than the one above it. But it's not like that with tone arms. They are just better across the board. So you'll have more powerful bass, weightier bass, better defined bass. It'll be more transparent. The top end will be sweeter. It'll have less distortion. It'll have less noise as you put the record on, put the stylus in the record groove. All of these things become very apparent when you refine the design.
Welcome to the Origin Live factory. I'm David Baker. I'm the operations manager here. This is Luke Baker, my brother. Believe it or not, we're related, and we're also Mark's sons. So it's a proper family business here. Making parts from raw material helps us to not only maintain tight tolerances, but it also means that we can really quickly manufacture prototypes. Most of the finishing is actually done by hand, sanded on a small hand lathe to give a brushed metal finish. The same goes for parts like our head shells, which are sanded by hand, and then the finger lift is bent into a curve. Parts like our high-end yokes are laboriously polished. This involves working through multiple layers of sanding and multiple grades of polish in order to achieve that luxurious mirror finish that you can see your reflection in. We use our laser cutter from Think Laser, a UK manufacturer, and we use this across a multitude of products. Significantly, the surface of our multi-layer platter. We're really proud that we manufacture all of our parts in-house in the UK.
We're kind of gone in a nice circle there of information, but that does lead me on to my next question would be, as a beginner, how do you know when is the right time to change the tone arm? Because there's so many things that you can focus on. You can focus on the turntable, the phono stage, which we spoke about yesterday is really important. The cartridge obviously is important. When is the right time? How do you know as a beginner, right, I need to change my tone arm?
If you've got a vinyl-based system, the conventional wisdom is to spend about 75% on the source, because the theory of rubbish in, rubbish out is absolutely right. And so conventional wisdom is 75% of your budget should go on the vinyl source. But then how do you split up the vinyl source? And again, we're probably unusual in suggesting this, and it's true for our equipment, but it's not true for every brand. But what we suggest is that the turntable tone arm split and the phono stage split should be, if you've got a total budget of, say, £3,000, £1,000 on the deck, £1,000 on the arm, £1,000 on the phono stage. So it's a third, a third, a third. And then the cartridge should be about a third of the price of each of those. So you'd be looking at a £350 cartridge.
I think it would be wrong of me to come here, meet you, and not talk about turntables, because, you know, tone arms are really interesting, but, you know, turntables are also important, especially as I saw recently that you guys had announced a new turntable, the Swift. And one thing that stood out to me about the Swift was its price point, what the turntable seemed to offer for its price point, but also that it features the new multi-layer platter, which seemed very interesting to me. So, you know, what is the Swift as a turntable, and what is the point or the design or the intended purpose of a multi-layer platter?
The Swift is £2,290. It's an extremely high performance turntable because it's got trickle down technology from our £40,000 Voyager deck. And we would confidently expect this to outperform most decks in the £10,000 region. So it's phenomenal value for money. But I think before going into why a multi-layer platter is so important, and I'll just uncover it to show what it is. I mean, this is the first layer, which is a composite mat. But under that, you've got this composite layer with over 1,000 slots in it. Now, this is huge, and people would think it's insignificant, but actually the closer you get to the stylus interface, the more important everything gets. We put probably 2 years research into this, and although it looks very simple with a load of slots and then these slight swirls, the way it works is actually complicated, and we've tried hundreds of different patterns and things to try and define what's the best. But before I think I go any further, I'd just like to kind of say that why it's important is that it's absorbing different frequencies. When you come to absorbing resonance created by the cartridge, because the cartridge makes the record vibrate, and you've got to earth that vibration as fast as possible. And people use felt mats. We used to use just acrylic and no felt mat, no cork mat, no, nothing would work on better than just putting the record straight on top of acrylic, until we found this wonder material. And then we went on to find a few other things which make it work. But why is it important to be able to absorb vibrations from the stylus? Most people, and I was among them originally, thought that the job of a turntable was to isolate it from vibrations coming up from the floor. And the reason people think that is because if you have a suspended wooden floor like we do, when the music gets up, you can feel the floor pumping, you can feel the shelves vibrating, the crockery starts trembling. So that's what people are thinking is affecting their record player, and it isn't. And the reason I can say that with absolute certainty, although it may affect it 15%, is because if you do a test, a simple test, and you listen to your record player through headphones and you turn off your speakers and all the external things that can make noise or cause vibration, and you listen to a track with your headphones on, and you then put the turntable on the floor and listen to the track again, the same track, exactly the same piece of music, it will sound very different. But the interesting thing is that difference will be absolutely identical when you listen to it through the speakers. So it's not the speakers which are causing this, it's the earthing of vibration from the turntable into the floor. So when it comes to, that's why we talk so much about the importance of absorbing different frequencies, because materials which will work well on high frequencies will not work well on low frequencies. It's as simple as that.
But my takeaway from just that little bit of conversation about the Swift is that there's a lot of engineering going into this as a product, and a lot of attentions to detail, which will elevate the performance up beyond maybe the price point, which is really interesting. Mark, this has been a fascinating couple of days spent with you, learning about Tonearm, seeing the factory, seeing people making things, listening to just one turntable, but listening to that, listening to some differences between some few different things. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for allowing me to come here. And I hope I get more experience with Origin Live products moving forward. So thank you very much. Thank you,
Terry.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody at home for watching the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please hit the thumbs up. And if you enjoy these types of hi-fi videos, then make sure you subscribe to the channel, because there's a hell of a long way still to go on this final journey. But it's fascinating, sitting and speaking to someone like you, Mark. It's absolutely fascinating. So thank you.